Anything we need to take up before we bring jurors?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Latour?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's fine. Let's bring jurors, please.
Zoned out for a moment.
Mr. Bradsher, further questions for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Agent Whitley, following up where we broke, we were on this issue of a document being transmitted through the SBI portal to the District 9A DA's office. Could you first explain to the jury, what is the SBI portal?
The SBI portal is very similar to the DAS system we heard about earlier. It's a paperless discovery system, and it basically transmits our investigative files from the SBI to the district attorney's offices across the state.
All right, and as we were talking earlier, this portal is exclusive to the SBI interfacing with district attorney's offices all across the state. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so when you submit evidence that you've collected, and that includes interviews, would you upload it into this digital system that would then be transmitted to Raleigh, where your supervisor is?
Yes.
All right. And then in terms of sending those documents to district attorney's office, it's still that same type of portal access. Is that right?
Yes, but I am not familiar with the other side of that equation. Raleigh takes care of that side of it. I'm not familiar with how they send it.
All right. The Defendant's Exhibit 30 that the jury looked at, that CID report with the index subjects, that's something you would enter into the system that would be transmitted by the portal. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that you would do from an investigative standpoint in general that you wouldn't upload into this computer system that's transmitted?
Are you asking, are there things that can't go through the system?
Yes.
Yes. Videos, I believe photographs, audio cannot go through the system. Many of the same shortcomings that the DAS system has, our system also has.
And when you reference DAS, won't go through all that again, but the digital system that we talked about last week that was being developed further in District 9A. Similar system for the defense side, is that right?
In so much as it's a paperless system. Beyond that, I do not know.
Okay. All right. When we broke, you had indicated that, well, you indicated 2 statements went through the portal, you thought. I asked you if that Defense Exhibit 30, in fact, was what went through. The question is, do you know? Really?
I was under the impression 2 11A interviews went through the portal.
All right. And isn't it true that there was an investigation into that would reveal the facts of what actually went through that portal?
When I first heard about this documents getting sent to you, I was under the impression that they were going to do an internal investigation to figure out where the breakdown happened. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge of it, though.
And that would be considered an administrative investigation, as we started the day with. Is that right?
That's correct.
Something that the SBI would investigate the SBI with regards to that transmission. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And that is not something that you would have turned over to the state in discovery?
No, sir.
All right. And the contents of that investigation, you don't know?
I do not.
All right. Just to follow up on a previous question, you indicated to me this morning when we started cross that I would know the nature of the investigation that was being done. You recall saying that?
Yes, sir.
All right. I wanted to ask you, do you recall who sent you to go to Judge Smith to get authorization as opposed to you doing this investigation under your original authority of theft of state property?
I don't.
Okay. Would that have been supervisor?
Probably.
Okay. This is an issue with regards to state payroll, is that right?
Well, it may be a little more complicated than just that, but
All right. The framework of Judge Crosswhite's investigation was the Cindy Blitzer hours in the Beacon system for hours she didn't work. Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay. Wasn't it true that since it was Beacon state payroll within the confines of what Judge Crosswhite said, that would be under Wake County DA jurisdiction?
Wake County can draw jurisdiction through that, I would think.
Or if it was someone in an elected DA's jurisdiction, you could go to that elected DA and begin the investigation that way. Isn't that right?
As long as they would not have a conflict of some sort.
All right. You mentioned that I contacted you on October 6th regarding media. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
And then we talked on October 19th. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. When did you become aware that Jay Stoltz was in a contested race for district court judge?
I would say very early on in the investigation.
All right. Would you agree that in terms of the investigation that Judge Crosswhite sent a requester letter of Cindy Blitzer's hours being the same as what was being put in Beacon, that you would have simply said a complaint was made that Cindy Blitzer was not working the hours she was putting in Beacon?
You mean when I met with you?
Yes,
Or-
or spoke with me on the phone.
I don't recall what the extent of our conversation was on the phone, but I'm almost positive I would have talked with you when we met about any exposure Jay Stoltz would have and your possible exposure due to the fact that you're the overall supervisor.
I understand we disagree on that point. I don't want to
Okay.
rehash that. I just ask you the question. I've asked you before, and I won't ask and answer. You feel like you said that, but you don't recall it. But I was trying to move past that. I guess I need to ask the question then. Isn't that something you would write down if you're telling the elected DA, hey, you're the subject of an investigation? I mean,
Objection. Sustained.
all right. Anyway, so when you said that over the phone to me, we did agree to that part, right? That you just said it was Cindy Blitzer, hours, no talk about an indexed subject. Is that right?
I don't know what we talked about, but I'm sure we covered the fact that it was a complaint on Cindy Blitzer.
All right. So then we talk again September 1st, don't we?
I don't recall off the top of my head if you,
All right. And then we talk September 6th. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
And then we talk September 19th. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And during all of those conversations, you agree there was no discussion about this Craig Blitzer, Cindy Blitzer, Rockingham County employees doing classes, right?
I would not have probably discussed that with you.
All right. And then when did we talk again before you went to Judge Crosswhite in December?
I don't know.
All right. After our meeting on the 19th, when I asked to be informed if Cindy Blitzer had actually, there was evidence that she was not working the hours, you recall that being asked?
I do.
Okay. And there was never any response to that, was there?
I don't remember if there was a response.
And then we're to November 30th. You do know there was this transmission in the portal. Is that right?
I don't know the specific date, but I know there was a transmission in the portal around that time frame.
All right. During this process, you knew early on Jay Stoltz was running for district court judge. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when the call was made to you October 6th about this media presence at the DA's office, and I contacted you, you recall saying anything to me about the district court judge's race?
I don't.
Okay. How about at the October 19th meeting?
I don't recall talking with you about the judge's race.
All right. Do you recall the general subject of the judge's race coming up in any of our conversations?
If it's documented in your interviews, other than that, no, I don't.
You did interview Jay Stoltz, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And without getting into specifically what he said, that issue also was generally discussed. Is that right?
That issue was discussed.
And so these interviews, multiple interviews with the Roxborough DA's office, or 9A, is occurring September into October, and with the Rockingham County DA's office, September and October, pursuant to that mandate from Judge Crosswhite, all leading up to a November 4th election date where Jay Stoltz was running for district court judge. Is that right?
I believe that would be the timeline.
All right. And when I showed you, to refresh your memory of the multiple calls from Jason Ramey and interviews, generally, that issue was also raised, wasn't it?
I don't remember if Mr. Ramey raised that issue or not. He very well could have. I don't remember, though.
Let me ask you this. I'll try one more time. Does it jog your memory any as to our discussion on October 19th when we met in my office, of that being one of the topics of concern expressed to you?
No, sir. We could have discussed it, but I do not recall it.
Within the scope of this investigation authorized by Judge Crosswhite in July of 2016, you would agree that politics or political motives should not enter into a criminal investigation that's confidential by the SBI for not just a state employee, but anybody. Isn't that true?
I agree that politics should never enter an investigation.
All right. And then ultimately, the story breaks October 28th. Is that right?
I don't recall when the media reports came out.
And then, November 4th, Jay Stoltz was elected district court judge, wasn't he?
He was.
All right. And the referral for further consideration or investigation by Judge Crosswhite was actually in December of 2016 to review the conduct of Cindy Blitzer and Jay Stoltz. Isn't that right?
I don't know what the correspondence was.
Okay. And ultimately, from this investigation that you've been testifying to, Craig Blitzer was never charged with any of these other employee-related academic fraud issues. Is that right?
Not charged with that, no.
All right. So when the prosecutor asked you at the end of his questioning on Friday that when you met with me, if you had just been shown some evidence that Cindy Blitzer was working, that the investigation would be over and you'd submit it to the judge and that was it. You remember answering that question?
With respect to Cindy,
With
if it had been proved she was working and we could document that, then yes.
Right. So the investigation with regards to another elected DA asking folks to take these courses,
Well, just because Judge Crosswhite only gives us certain parameters, we're not going to ignore information that we get from the citizenry. If we come across that information, we will take that information, get it to the right people, and
in addition to citizenry, you got it from Rockingham County DA staff members.
from whoever. And if an additional request would need to be made, you know, the investigation could be expanded to include whatever.
So do you know Melanie Bridge?
I've heard her name. I don't know that I really know her.
All right. And your office, you're stationed in Hickory, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And after the let me just end here. Craig Blitzer also represented to you that Cindy Blitzer worked every hour that she recorded up till the Shockley file was taken as well. Isn't that right?
I don't remember his exact language, but the general information was that she worked up until the file was taken.
And the first time he gave you a statement was in May of 2017, is that right?
That's correct.
And everything collected during the scope of Judge Crosswhite's investigation about the use of Rockingham County DAs to take courses from Ms. Blitzer, that was not charged, right?
There were no charges generated as a result of that information.
Okay. And Cindy Blitzer wasn't charged at all, isn't that right?
That is correct.
So when did you learn that Ms. Hallbrook had been let go from my office?
I don't recall the date, but I believe it would have been either the same day or the day after you let her go.
All right. And we touched on it Friday, but you did get a phone call from her talking about the general topic of why she had been let go from her own mouth, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you documented that, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then there was a civil action filed, is that right?
That's correct.
And isn't it true that after the civil action was filed, Craig and Cindy Blitzer came in and gave you their statement?
It was after the civil action was filed.
So in terms of facts for the jury, at what point do you recall either Craig or Cindy Blitzer or attorneys on their behalf reaching out to you as a part of the investigation that Judge Crosswhite had originally authorized?
I don't recall the specific days, but it would have been in the week to 2 weeks prior to the interviews.
So all the way up to April of 2017, Craig and Cindy Blitzer, either directly or through their attorneys, would not have reached out to cooperate with the SBI investigation. Is that right?
No statements were provided prior to that time.
Well, any cooperation?
Well, as far as cooperation, you know, we respected Mr. Blitzer and Ms. Blitzer's decision not to submit themselves for interviews. But we still did go into the Rockingham County District Attorney's Office and conduct interviews. It was, whether that was good cooperation or just not obstruction, I don't know, but we
All right.
went in and did those interviews.
Okay. And as a part of that investigative process, before they gave the statements, the SBI would have come in and seized, pursuant to a search warrant, a computer that was identified as Cindy Blitzer's computer. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And isn't it true that you documented in a report that the last activity indicated on that computer was October 6th of 2016?
Well, I wouldn't have documented that. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to.
All right. Well, at this point, you're still investigating whether Cindy Blitzer was working the hours that she tendered. Is that right?
What time frame are we in?
Okay. October 24th, she was let go from the District 9A's office. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right? So November, December, January, February, March, you are still investigating whether Cindy Blitzer worked the hours that she reflected that she did in Beacon. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And as a part of that, you did a search warrant to seize her computer at the Rockingham County DA's office.
That's correct.
Right. And isn't it true, as a part of the search warrant, you prepared information to justify the search warrant, didn't you?
I did.
Okay. And wouldn't you have included that the last activity on her computer was October 6th of 2016?
I very well may have. I don't recall the probable cause that went into the search warrant.
All right. We did talk earlier that you spoke with Melinda Richardson on October 6th, 2016. Is that right, the AA?
We said that she did speak with me around that time frame.
Okay. And we're not getting into the specifics of that yet, and now you've got computer activity on her computer October 6, 2016. Is that right?
Once again, I don't recall whether that language was put into the search warrant or not.
And then the SBI actually went in and seized that computer.
That is correct.
Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
So were you part of having that computer forensically examined?
So we did seize a computer from the Rockingham County District Attorney's Office. The computer was placed in evidence storage. Prior to any forensic analysis of the computer, we realized that Cindy Blitzer and Craig Blitzer were going to come in to make a statement. At that point, it's less important for the computer and the analysis of the computer to corroborate the fact that she's either working or not working. Best evidence is probably her own mouth saying, no, I did not work. And at that point, we elected not to analyze the contents of the computer.
So where's this computer?
It's in evidence control in Hickory, North Carolina.
So there's a piece of evidence designated in the search warrant as Cindy Blitzer's computer sitting in evidence in Hickory, North Carolina right now. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the decision was made once Cindy Blitzer gave her statement to the SBI on her version of the events.
That is correct.
That the decision was made not to forensically examine her computer for what had been done on that computer.
That is correct.
So y'all just took what Cindy said as the truth, right?
Well, her statement was corroborated by quite a bit of information, including her husband's statement.
So you took Cindy and Craig Blitzer's representation that she was working every hour she recorded up till the Shockley file was taken, and that she didn't work any hours from after that until she was let go in October. Is that right?
That's correct.
And as we sit here now in trial, there is no plan to forensically check out what was done on Cindy Blitzer's computer. Is that right?
That's correct.
Nothing further.
Redirect, Mr. Latour.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent Whitley. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the statement that Wallace Bradsher gave to you in your reports and notes, okay? A great deal of time was spent over the last day and a half discussing what was in your report and what wasn't in your report, right?
Correct.
And whether your report was confusing or conflating notes and your memories, right?
Correct.
At some point, before you published this report into the portal, as we've talked about, did you, or at some point during this investigation before the last day and a half, did you give the defendant a chance to review that statement?
I did.
And had you given, or had he availed himself of that opportunity, do you think any of those inconsistencies or confusion could have been cleared up then?
That is correct.
Why do you give people the opportunity to review a statement?
Well, we want to get the truth. We want to get it exactly right.
Now, you said that you gave him the opportunity, and he said if you emailed it to him, he would look at it, right?
That is correct.
You didn't do that.
No, sir.
What are the reasons why, if any, that you did not do that?
Well, I did not think that he would get back with me, number one, to tell me if there were parts of the interview that were incorrect.
Well, why did you think he wouldn't get back with you?
Well, we had just been face to face, and he said he did not want to provide an additional statement. I took it that he probably wouldn't provide anything additional after that either.
Okay. What other reason, if there were any, that you didn't give him a chance to email it to him?
Well, even though he's a district attorney, we're not supposed to email our investigative files to anyone. Had he been a district attorney in the copies list and authorized recipient, we could have provided him with a copy, but he didn't have authorization to receive it by email.
When you went back to talk to him that second time, and he, as you said, made it clear that he didn't want to add anything to his statement, did you have prepared other questions that related to these topics that you wanted to ask him?
I did.
You know how many questions you had prepared?
I don't.
Were the questions that you had prepared to ask him, did they relate to the issues that apparently there was some confusion about?
Yes, sir.
Did you get a chance to ask him any of those questions?
No, sir.
Why not?
He terminated the interview.
Now, there was also over the last day and a half a lot of discussion about Judge Crosswhite's initial letter, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said you did not have that letter, but you remembered it including either Wallace Bradsher's name or some supervisory capacity. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 14. If you'll look at that. after you've had a moment to review it, if you'll let me know if you recognize it or what it is.
Yes, this is the letter.
When you say this is the letter, what letter is that?
This is the letter that Judge Crosswhite mailed the SBI requesting an official investigation.
That's the first letter that there was all this discussion about, whether people are indexed or not indexed and things like that?
Yes, sir. This is, he asked that we thoroughly investigate the actions.
Well, before you tell us what it is, having looked at that, does that appear to be an accurate representation and not altered in any way?
No, sir. It has not been altered other than discovery numbers on it and state's exhibit sticker.
Your Honor, the state will move to introduce State's Exhibit 14.
Any
Hence, just simply request foundation of the date of the letter and when this witness received it.
Go ahead, Mr. Latour.
Do you have any markings on that document that indicate when the SBI would have received that letter?
Yes, sir.
What's the date that the SBI would have received that letter?
It's stamped received August 1st,
Of what year?
2016.
Is the letter dated as in its creation?
It's dated as July 25, 2016.
State would renew its motion to introduce
No
State's Exhibit
objection.
14.
It's allowed.
Now, looking at State's Exhibit 14, does it indicate on there the scope of the investigation that you were authorized to participate in?
Yes, sir.
Will you read for the jury what that letter says?
Dear Director Schurmeyer, pursuant to my conversation with Assistant Special Agent in Charge Danny Mays and Assistant Special Agent in Charge David Whitley, and my understanding of the facts, I am requesting a complete investigation by the State Bureau of Investigation into the possible theft of state funds as a result of the misuse of the North Carolina beacon and payroll system by Cindy Blitzer. Mrs. Blitzer currently serves as the DA investigator in the office of District Attorney Wallace Bradsher, parens 9A, Person and Caswell counties, in parentheses. I would ask that you thoroughly investigate the actions of Ms. Blitzer as well as the actions of Assistant District Attorney J. Hoyt Stoltz, who approves Ms. Blitzer's time in the Beacon payroll system, and Mr. Stoltz's direct supervisor, District Attorney Wallace Bradsher. I will continue to review all investigative materials in this case until I determine if this matter should be transferred to the special prosecutor in the Attorney General's office. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Should you have any additional questions, I can be reached on, and he gives a cell phone number. Sincerely, Joseph N. Crosswhite, Senior Resident Superior Court Judge.
So now, looking at that, does that refresh your recollection about whether or not the defendant was named in that letter as someone that was to be investigated as a result of the information provided?
Yes,
And it in fact has his name, Wallace Bradsher, correct?
yes, sir.
So whether or not he was listed in that defendant's Exhibit 30, which was where you said indexed certain people, what was your understanding about who you were supposed to investigate as of August the 1st?
Yes, my understanding was that they, all three, in this case, were subjects.
Now, the other thing I want to talk to you about is your decision to, or when your decision was made about interviewing Tyler Henderson, okay?
Okay.
In reviewing your notes and your testimony over the last day and a half, do you recall that, or do you know if you waited to interview Tyler Henderson until you had further documentation?
We did.
What other documentation were you waiting to get in order to interview Tyler Henderson?
We wanted to get both records from his school and also personnel records.
Why would you want to get all of those things before you sit down to have an interview with Tyler Henderson?
We wanted to be well prepared for the interview.
Is that normal?
Yes, it's normal to want to be well prepared for an interview.
Is it normal that you would request documents about a person you're going to interview?
Yes, sir.
Is it normal that you would wait to receive those documents before you sit down to have an interview?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Well, you need a certain knowledge base to go in to ask the questions.
Is that what you were doing with Tyler Henderson?
Yes, sir.
Was that part of what you were doing with Tyler Henderson and the reason that you waited?
Yes, sir.
What was the other reason why you waited, if there was one?
Early on in the investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office expressed an interest in the case, and we did receive some direction at some point in the fall.
Object, motion to strike.
Overruled. I instruct you not to say what you were told by anyone from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
As a result of your discussions with the U.S. Attorney's Office, is that the federal government?
Yes, sir.
Objection.
Overruled.
Did that play a role in the delay of your interviews with certain witnesses?
Yes, sir.
And at some point at some point did your business with the federal government conclude?
Yes, sir.
And when it concluded, what did you do about interviews in this case, if anything?
Resumed the activity.
Is that normal?
Is what normal?
When the federal government gets involved, that it delay your process?
In this situation, it was, yes.
Now, as far as the interview or the lack of an interview with Elisa Black, you testified that, you don't remember why you didn't meet with her. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, yes.
Okay. Would you have liked to have met with her?
Sure.
All right. By the time, if you had met with her, what type of information would you have been looking for?
The information we would have sought was, did she work with Cindy Blitzer, particularly during the time frame that Cindy Blitzer was in school?
And at some point before the defendant is charged with any crime, did you sit down with Cindy Blitzer?
Yes.
And when you sat down with Cindy Blitzer, did she tell you that she wasn't working?
Yes.
If she had told you that she was working, could you have reached back out to Elisa Black?
That is correct.
When you found out from Cindy Blitzer that she wasn't working, did you reach back out to Elisa Black?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because I knew she wasn't working.
You testified, or you were asked the question on cross-examination about you just took Cindy Blitzer at her word and Craig Blitzer at her word. Is that true?
We took them at their word, but only because it appeared that the information in general was corroborated by other witness statements and other information.
Now, at some point, you remember hearing during your investigation and your interviews with Craig and Cindy Blitzer about a telephone call to the defendant.
That is correct.
And is this the telephone call that they talked about calling up and wanting to resign, Cindy wanting to resign?
That is correct.
During your investigation, Agent Whitley, did you get telephone records as they relate to Craig and Cindy Blitzer's home telephone?
Yes, sir.
And how did you go about doing that?
Subpoenas were issued to the carriers.
And at some point during your investigation, were you able to determine what Craig and Cindy Blitzer's home telephone number was?
Yes, sir.
What is your understanding of what that phone number was?
Cindy Blitzer's home phone I have listed as 336-347.
All right. And at some point, were you able to determine if Wallace Bradsher's cellular phone number was?
Yes, sir. I have it listed as
As a result of your request from the telephone company, were you able to receive telephone records for that home number that you just listed of 336-347?
Yes, sir.
And in your review of those records, were you able to determine if there was any evidence to corroborate that statement by Craig and Cindy Blitzer that they had made a telephone call and had a conversation with the defendant?
Yes, sir.
And were you able to determine what date that telephone call occurred?
Yes, sir.
And what day was that?
It was in October. If I could see the records, I could tell you what day.
May I approach?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what I've marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 15. You'll take a moment, look at State's Exhibit 15, tell me if you recognize that.
I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is a return from the subpoena that was issued.
So are those the cell phone records for that phone number, that home phone number?
Yes, sir.
All right. And if you will look at October the 18th of 2016 in those phone records.
Yes, sir.
Does October the 18th of 2016 in those phone records refresh your recollection as to the date in which a telephone call would have been made by Craig and Cindy Blitzer's home number to Wallace Bradsher?
Objection to that conclusion. I don't object to the number to number.
Wallace Bradsher's telephone number.
All right.
I don't suppose I could have a highlighter.
May I approach?
Yes, please.
If you'll look at that at October the 18th at around 10:45:50.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you see at 10:45:50?
A telephone call from 336-347-0176. The number that I have listed is Cindy Blitzer's home phone, to 336. The number that I have listed is Mr. Bradsher's cell phone.
Are you able to determine from that the duration of that telephone call?
Yes, sir.
What was the duration of that telephone call?
27 minutes,
27 minutes?
or excuse me, seconds.
27 seconds, okay? Now, you've testified about the time of 10:45:50 p.m. That's Greenwich Mean Time, correct?
Yes, sir.
What's your understanding of what time that actually occurred at this time?
That would be 6:45 instead of 10:45.
You subtract 4 hours from that?
Yes, sir.
Now, when Cindy Blitzer and Craig Blitzer gave you a statement, did they tell you about that telephone call?
Yes, sir.
And what's your recollection of the first telephone call on that date that they testified or told you about?
I believe Ms. Blitzer said that she telephoned Mr. Bradsher, and then he called her back.
Okay. And does that record indicate on there a telephone call back from that number that you have listed as Craig Blitzer's cell phone? I would ask you to look at the same page. Would it be at 11:41:07? Is there a telephone number there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And looking at that, you have it highlighted there for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does it indicate that that telephone number that you have for Craig Blitzer telephoned for Wallace Bradsher telephoned the home phone number belonging to Craig and Cindy Blitzer?
Yes.
And can you tell us what time that occurred?
That time is showing at 11:11:03, which would be
About 7 o'clock?
yes, sir.
Okay. Well, 7:11.
11:03.
Okay. Because it's Greenwich Mean Time and you're subtracting
You
4.
have to subtract.
All right. Now, do you have a duration of that telephone call?
Yes, sir.
And what's the duration of that telephone call?
30 minutes and 4 seconds is listed.
All right. Now, when you said that they being Craig and Cindy, called Wallace Bradsher, did Cindy Blitzer tell you that Wallace Bradsher called them back?
Yes, sir.
And is that the conversation that they testified about and that they told you about, where they're both in 2 separate rooms of the...
That's the same conversation.
Okay. And that was about a 30-minute long conversation?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, moving forward on that to the next page, I believe you testified or may have heard that Cindy Blitzer was let go from her employment on October the 24th of 2016. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is there a telephone call that the number belonging to Wallace Bradsher telephoned Craig and Cindy Blitzer's home number on that occasion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and would that be at about 5:15:46 Greenwich Mean Time?
Yes, sir.
In looking at that, can you tell how long that conversation lasted? Or that telephone call lasted?
53 seconds is listed.
Now, do you recall from your interview with Cindy and Craig Blitzer about them saying anything about receiving a telephone call from Wallace Bradsher on the date that she was to be released from her employment?
I do.
What do you recall?
She said that she said that she was released from employment, and what happened was she received a call from Mr. Bradsher, and she called back into the office and spoke with the administrative assistant, and was released from employment.
There was a lot of talk about the inaccuracies or questions about inaccuracies in your reporting, and that your policy does not require you to record interviews. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there anything in your policy that prohibits a person being interviewed to record?
No, sir.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Bradsher, recross.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Agent Whitley, isn't it true, and I'm going to have to pull that statement, that Cindy Blitzer testified that she called from her home to my home?
She did.
All right. And the phone call to my home, you researched my home phone number, didn't you?
I believe we did, yes.
And isn't it true that's 336-597-9975?
Are you saying your home phone?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And you recall not only Cindy Blitzer's statement to you, but her testimony here that she was in her house and Craig Blitzer was on an extension, and they called to my home for her to offer her resignation. Is that right?
I don't remember if she said your home or what cell, but
All right.
that's generally right.
All right, I will pull that. So, as we talked about that conversation, isn't it true that she indicated that we talked and said some things to each other? Is that right?
That's correct.
You heard me question her about what I said to her about continuing to work. Is that right?
I don't recall that specifically, but
All right. 30-minute conversation is what the records show. Is that right?
I'm sorry. You're talking about the phone call now?
Right, when she called from her house to my house with the offer of resignation.
Yes, sir.
That's the phone call that you just described.
Yes, sir.
For the prosecutor, is that right? And you've told this jury that the home phone number for Cindy Blitzer you have from your investigation was what?
336-347-0176.
All right. That's not Craig Blitzer's cell phone number, is it?
It could be used as his cell phone number also. I don't know.
Isn't it true that you know from the investigation that on October 18th, 2016, I was actually at the elected DA's conference with a bunch of other elected DAs? Isn't that true?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. This Greenwich Mean Time is how many hours off of what's recorded?
My understanding is it's 4 hours.
4 hours, okay. So where it shows 11:11, a 30-minute conversation with 336-347-016, you have it at approximately 7:11 p.m. Is that correct?
Which date, sir?
Well, what the prosecutor just asked you about. October 18th of 2016.
Yes, sir. We talked about 2 phone calls that day.
All right. 2 phone calls that day? The first one was a 27-second call, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So do you recall in discovery tendering to the defense that Cindy Blitzer's home phone number was 336-361-402?
Yes, Ms. Blitzer, when I interviewed her, she did give me that number, saying that during this phone call, she called Wallace Bradsher using the telephone number for him of 336-583. She said that she used her home phone to place the call, and she gave me her home phone number as 336-36.
So, this October 18th call that we just talked about, that the prosecutor asked you about, was that phone record that he just showed you about an October 18th call, a phone call from 336-36140?
No, sir.
Did you get the records for 336-361?
Yes, sir. When
Okay.
we originally subpoenaed that record, it came back as no information from the phone carrier, and that information was submitted in the case file.
So in your statement from Cindy Blitzer in May of 2017, she would have said that she made a call from her home phone number to me. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And the number she said that was their home phone number at the time that she gave you, no records came back. Is that right?
That is correct. Well, records came back, but the record was that they had no records.
All right.
If that makes sense.
So if you could tell the jury, what is Craig Blitzer's cell phone number?
I have Craig Blitzer's cell phone number is 336-347-0176.
Now, Cindy Blitzer did tell you that she had a landline at this time that they called from the house on, right?
She did.
And a landline is one of those things where in your house, you got all these different phone receivers. You can pick up and listen to each other on the phone, right?
That's correct.
And this demonstration that they did for you, that one was in that room and one's in here and they're on the line listening to what everybody's saying, that would make sense with a landline, wouldn't it?
Yes.
But not so much with a cell phone, would it?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
The phone system in my house, my wife's phone rings to every one of our landline phones, and I don't know how they had theirs set up. I don't.
All right. Again, you just believed her, right?
I just took down the information she gave me.
Okay. So this phone conversation from 336-347-0176, you did when you got the information, it was a number assigned to Craig Blitzer. Is that right?
I knew that it was a number assigned to them collectively, I believe.
So in both their names?
Yeah, I actually have that documented in other parts of the case file as a home phone, and so that's probably why I listed it in her biographical information as home phone.
You do have this as Craig Blitzer's cell phone number, is that right?
I also have it under his name for cell phone, yes.
All right. 336-347-0176.
Yes, sir.
But you also have documented in the file that Cindy Blitzer has a cell phone number that she uses of 336-209-1061. Isn't that right?
Where is that?
That's not a number you recall. That's a lot of phone numbers. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't recall that number off the top of my head, but we subpoenaed several numbers, so.
But from your investigation, you would have documented the cell phone number that Cindy uses, wouldn't you?
I'm sure we would have at some point, yes.
All right. And just my question, and I'll move on. Do you recall if that is 336-209?
I don't have that listed on any of the documents in front of me, I don't believe.
And 336-347 you have noted as Craig Blitzer's cell phone number, isn't that right?
I have that noted for Craig Blitzer's cell phone and also Cindy Blitzer's telephone.
Okay, where did that come from? Is that from some phone records or
Probably
investigation?
probably from, I guess after this time frame, we would have had her school records, could have come from the school records, could have come from the district attorney's office where I just called and asked.
How about this? The Blitzers lived in Rockingham County, is that right?
Yes, sir.
She tells you in the interview, I called Mr. Bradsher from 36140.
Yes, sir.
Is that a local carrier in Rockingham County where people that have a house and they call and set up phone service and a landline set up?
I don't recall who the carrier is.
All right. So on the second date that the prosecutor asked you about was the date of termination, is that right?
That's correct.
And he indicated to you that the records said 5:11 p.m., is that right?
I've got 5:15:46.
Okay. And again, under your Greenwich Mean Time calculation, it's 4 hours earlier, right?
Yes,
And that's a 27-second call, isn't that right?
I've got 53 seconds.
And isn't it true, Agent Whitley, that consistent with your investigation, that there was a phone call to Craig Blitzer's cell phone number from my cell phone number on the date of Cindy Blitzer's termination? Isn't that right?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
And you knew at that moment, as of October 24th, 2017, you had been told that Mr. Grace was representing Mr. Blitzer and Miss Blitzer, and they were not making themselves available for interview. Is that right?
That is correct.
And did you hear Miss Pede's testimony earlier on Friday?
Yes, sir.
And didn't you hear her say the statement that because I could not speak with Cindy, that I was going to let her go?
Yes, sir, I did hear that.
But in attempting to contact Cindy Blitzer, you do not know what representation Mr. Blitzer made about not being allowed to speak to Cindy Blitzer.
Sorry, sir, I don't follow you.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. In terms of the description of that phone call, did Cindy Blitzer tell you in her statement to you that I called her on the day of termination?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. What did Cindy Blitzer say?
That she received a call from you to call into the office.
All right. Did you find that?
I'm not sure.
Did you find that call where Cindy Blitzer called Gail P?
No, sir, I don't believe I've seen that, no.
Because that would have actually come from Cindy Blitzer's cell phone number, right?
Yes, sir. I suppose. I don't know if she's calling from her cell phone or not.
All right. Not Craig Blitzer's cell phone number.
I don't know what number she would have called from.
So, Agent Whitley, doesn't this phone call on the 18th, prior to you and I talking on the 19th, jog your memory about me telling you I had just come from the elected DA's conference and there was a discussion with 3 other elected DAs?
Sustained.
Does it refresh your memory at all about the general topic of me seeking advice from 3 elected DAs?
Sustained.
All right, let me try one more time. Did the general topic of 3 elected DAs and me talking come up at the October 19th meeting?
Yes, sir. What I recall from that is you saying that you had spoken with Senior Resident Superior Court Judge W. Osmond Smith, 3 other elected district attorneys.
Okay. May we approach her?
Yes, sir.
You interviewed Ms. Blitzer on May 12th, 2017, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Madam Clerk? In just a second. May I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Handy must be marked as Defense Exhibit 36. Do you recognize that as Cindy Blitzer's statement?
Yes, sir.
All right. Can you turn to the page about the house-to-house phone call?
Yes, sir. I believe that's on page 18.
All right. All right, the second paragraph on page 18. Do you see where you have documented the phone call?
Yes, sir.
All right. Isn't it true that Cindy Blitzer told you that she used the telephone number she had for him, 336-583-5374?
That's correct.
Isn't it true Cindy Blitzer said that she used her home telephone number to place the call, 336?
That is correct.
All right. Now, do you recall what Craig Blitzer said about that call?
I would have to turn to that part.
All right. Do you have his
I
statement?
recall it in general, yes.
All right. Do you have his statement with you?
I do.
All right. If you could look at Craig Blitzer's statement, what does he say about that phone call?
Do you know which page that's on?
I do not.
Okay. Yes, sir.
All right. What did Craig Blitzer say about that phone call?
He said that he recalled talking to you approximately 3 weeks before she was let go, that Cindy Blitzer called you with Craig Blitzer listening on a telephone extension. Cindy Blitzer asked Wallace Bradsher if she should resign, and he said no, that he would go to a jury trial. He said no one was doing anything wrong,
And did he tell you, other than 3 weeks before the resignation, a time frame or a date?
He said at this point, the investigation was publicized.
All right, that's what I want to get to. Did Cindy Blitzer say that? That it was a time when it was publicized?
She said that she recalled Wallace Bradsher said that he had talked to Whitley.
So does that give you any time frame?
She also said that she had read about the SBI investigation in the media.
And there was no media account as of October 18th, is that right?
Question asked and answered.
Sustained.
But Craig Blitzer said this was after the media came out, is that right? It was in the press.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you ever take this number? I understand you got no carrier information on the number Ms. Blitzer gave you. Did you ever look to see if that number called my home number?
I don't think that we received records from that carrier. I don't know if I compared it to your records or not.
Look at my home phone number as it relates to Cindy Blitzer and Craig Blitzer's home phone number.
Are you asking me to do that now?
I'm asking you if you have done that as part of your
I
investigation.
don't think I have, no.
Okay, so is it fair then to say that you took Cindy's statement, Craig's statement, and then took phone records and went and saw October 18th and made the conclusion that that was the phone call described by Ms. Blitzer? Or did you ask Ms. Blitzer specifically as to that phone record?
I don't think I made any conclusions, but I thought that that corroborated her statement.
All right, so once you got the records, did you go back to her and say, was it on October 18th?
No, sir, I don't believe I did.
All right,
Mr. Bradsher, it's 5 o'clock. We're going to
Yes.
recess for the afternoon. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Please recall all the instructions I've given you. Gather in the deliberation room at 9:30 and leave your notepads on the chairs. Couple scheduling things. One, to remind you of that this Friday we will not be in session for this trial. So that day will be a free day for you all. Tomorrow we're going to have to start lunch a little earlier, and because of a meeting that I have that starts that overlaps our regular lunch period. So we'll probably break around 12 o'clock for lunch and go to about 1:45, just in case you have plans for lunch tomorrow. All right, thank you all very much for your service. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9:30.